Hello, and welcome to Ficsation, where I talk to my guests about their fiction fixations. I am Daniel Radford, author, podcaster, and maker of things, and today I'm joined by fellow author Ian Salavon. Hello. I pronounced that.
Hello.
I
I'm
pronounced that right, didn't I?
which one, the Ian or the Salavon?
The Salavon.
They're both right. It doesn't matter.
Let's go. Thank you for coming. Thanks for being here.
Oh yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. I've listened to your show a couple of times. It's been really cool, and like I love hearing about what influences other people and where they come from, artistically. So it's always a blast to be a part of it.
Oh, yeah, it's great. I love listening to people just talk about things they like passionately or things like that and seeing how that's affected them. And I've got to learn about a lot of different media and things like that as well. I wouldn't have looked at otherwise. So I'm glad I'm doing this show. It's great, very useful for finding new media and learning things.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
So today, speaking of media, is actually a first for Fixation because we're not talking about a book or a TV show or a movie or even a video game or anything like that. Today, we're talking about Torg, or more specifically, Torg Eternity, I believe, although they're more or less the same thing, which is actually a TTRPG.
That's right.
For those of you listening who don't know what that is, a TTRPG just stands for tabletop role-playing game. It's basically things like D&D or Vampire. You play characters involved in a usually fantastical setting and story with sort of game mechanics like dice or cards helping dictate the story and how you interact with it. It's basically make-believe with extra steps, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's think about it kind of like a choose your own adventure book with the number of choices are infinite.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it, actually. I like that.
Yeah.
A bit of a TTRPG enthusiast myself, actually, so I was looking forward to this one. Ever since someone dragged me into a D&D game against my will years ago, I've never turned back. I've done
Yeah,
it a bit, so
it's I mean obviously, that's the kind of the D&D is that's the granddaddy of all of them, so to speak. And when Torg came out in the early 90s, the initial thing was because it's spelled Torg, and the initial kind of uh, I guess talk around it was it stood for the other role playing game, but that's not what it stands for. Um, it's actually a Norwegian word that kind of means like marketplace or meeting place, and everybody kind of swarming to one area. And that's I think that's kind of where it got its I guess you know uh, affinity or its identity was from that word, and that's kind of where it all came from. But
yeah, I did have a good chuckle when I heard about the other role-playing game thing. I
yeah,
thought that was quite
right,
good.
yeah, right, yeah, that's not what it is. But yeah, that was when it came out. That was kind of that was kind of the joke of people kind of clowning on it. Um,
I'd never heard of this one. I've heard of a fair few of these at this point, and dabble in a few as well. I'm even working on my own slowly but surely. So, but I'd never heard of Torg until you mentioned it, and then I looked into it from there. So you're definitely the expert here. I don't know that much about it at all, so maybe you could explain a little bit about Torg and how it is you got into it.
okay, well, I have a buddy of mine who is as much as I'm into tabletop playing games, this guy is like beyond that. It's more than just a hobby. This guy is like like a professional game master, so to speak. 3D printers that print up his miniatures and interactive touchscreen tables and maps and that kind of stuff. But he introduced me to Torg Torg Eternity, which is the kind of the second iteration of it when it came out. And what it is basically is it is a multi-genre role-playing game where the genre actually acts as metaphysics in the game. There's mechanics and laws that operate within the game that are fueled by the genre that the characters occupy when they occupy these different parts of this world. So basically the premise of this thing is there's core Earth, which is the Earth, that we live on, and there are these 7 different invading realities that are all around the planet that have started to take over different parts of the planet. So like one of them, for example, is the Living Land, which is like a prehistoric time that has taken over the coasts of the United States. There's a little bit of there's a little morsel of it in northern Canada, and then there's another piece on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. So there's another encroaching one called Isle, which is the fantasy realm that has taken over England and much of Scandinavia. And all these different worlds, there are these high lords that are hell-bent in competing with each other to kind of just take over reality altogether. And they're all competing with each other on Earth to take over. That's kind of the premise of the game. And your character is what's called a Storm Knight that resists this reality takeover with this energy called possibilities that give you these wildly incredible things that you can do. And the game itself, it rewards and encourages cinematic play, so much so that like encounters are called scenes, and a session that you sit down and play is actually called an act. And all that is fueled by the unknown function of the drama deck and these different cards that you can play that tell you, okay, so like you flip over this one card and it may say, okay, the villains have the first attack or have the first action this round, so or this scene. So the villains would act first and then you would act, and then the next card gets flipped over and it may say something else completely. So it's all kind of chaotic, and it's built that way on purpose. It's kind of built the way to be. It's meant to be messy. I guess is what I'm
Yeah, it
getting at here with that.
seems a lot more intentionally chaotic, I think was a good way to describe what I've seen because I've been on I've played on both sides of the spectrum where you've got, very tight, stringent rules, and you have stuff that's a lot more open to interpretation. But both
Mhm.
sides of that are still fairly structured in how they function. They don't typically, unless you're the lunatic who picks wild magic sorcerer in 5e, I guess. They don't generally intentionally add an element of complete randomness. So I saw that, I was like, that is such a fun idea.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. And then on top of that is you as the players, you have a certain amount of cards that you can play on different actions. And those are called destiny cards. So like a destiny card may say something like oh, you get a +3 to this action, or you get you can use this card as a possibility action, which a possibility action gives you the ability to roll an extra die to add on to things. So you can play that on top of stuff on top of each other. You can play it on other characters or on other player characters for them to assist them and for them to help you. So yeah, it really is kind of beautifully messy. It's kind of a absurdity with real stakes.
Yeah. I do like that idea of aiming to be cinematic because a lot of people try to introduce cinematic moments and things like that to games on their own, which is fine. I love that. I love when people try to do that stuff. It's great. But it's cool to see someone taking that idea of these wild, unpredictable happenings, of these like dramatic shifts in momentum that you would get in like an adventure or action movie, and going, let's make that the entire point.
Yeah, and there are just kind of to jump on that. There's a third type of card called a cosm card, and all these different worlds like the Living Land and Isle and some of these other worlds. Those are all called cosms, and they all have their own like world laws and their own axioms. And axioms are basically that reality's stats, so to speak. So there's the magic axiom, there's the social axiom, the spirit axiom, and the tech axiom. So, and depending on where those axioms are, is how well you can operate within that cosm, right? Within that reality. And some of these things cause what's called contradictions. So if you have like a science fiction type ray gun, very high tech, and you're walking around the living land, well, it may not function. It may not work right. So if you have like a social axiom kind of fuels psionics. So if you have psionics and you're going somewhere where the social axiom is really low, you may not be able to operate properly. You can play these other cosm cards on just at pretty much at any point, but like that give you completely unpredictable results. So like one of them, I've got one right in my hand right now for the Living Land called Primal Instincts, and it says the Storm Knights embrace the primal allure of the living land. Clothing rips in the most flattering way, and passions are greatly amplified during the next lull in action. Storm Knights who have an amorous encounter gain two possibilities.
That is
So
insane that there's a mechanic for that.
exactly right. Yeah. So that's actually part of the game. You can play that at some point and actually use that in the narrative, in the mechanics. It's all part of the same thing.
And that is always something that I find is really cool, is that when the mechanics of I find I'm the same for video games as well, but with the mechanics of a game are integrated into the story and the setting. It's not just there's no longer that divide between, okay, this is what the mechanics say and this is what's happening. It becomes more this interwoven thing where one fuels the other, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and one of the things that it was most impressive and alluring to me about this game, and I think one of the reasons why I really identified with it is it really uses these genres as scaffolding to tell these stories. It's not You are not operating in tropes. The tropes certainly exist, but they're not part and parcel of that's not what sets the genre apart. So like I said, it's scaffolding. And that's one of the reasons why I really liked it, because I write that way. I'm not I'll put it this way. I respect genre, but I don't revere it. I'll subvert it. And that's something that I think Torg does really well. It subverts genre respectfully. I mean, it does it in a way where it doesn't it's not parody. You know what I mean? It's not really satire. It's campy and it's melodramatic, but it's also sincere.
I do get where you're coming from with that from a writing perspective as well, because I do think it's one of the downfalls, especially with modern writing, is that whilst media literacy has definitely increased exponentially, thankfully, so has the tendency to analyze, oh, these are the tropes that this genre and this type of story has. I got to hit those milestones in my book. And when you do that, you end up with really formulaic storytelling. So it's always cool when someone can subvert the tropes, but do so in that sincere way, that this idea of, yeah, I'm writing a fantasy story, but I don't need to hit the standard hero's journey. I'm just going to write the story I want to write in a fantasy setting. The books I currently have out, other than, the picture book, because that's a little easier to categorize, I guess. I've always had an absolute nightmare of a time when people ask me what genre they are, because it's like, technically, I guess they're literary, but literary is kind of just the what you say when it doesn't fit into a genre and it's realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm kind of in between. The some of the settings and the things in my work are too fantastical to be considered literary, and but the topics and the themes that I write about are too serious to be considered genre. So I have a very hard time nailing that. Typically, what I tell people is, if you ever watch Black Mirror, that's the kind of stuff I write. You ever watch The Twilight Zone? That's the kind of stuff I write.
Well,
So
that is awesome because I have not seen The Twilight Zone yet, but I have a lot of respect for it, and I have seen Black Mirror, and
yeah,
it's very good.
yeah. No, Charlie Brooker is awesome. He's a great writer. But then I also say, if you ever played the role playing game Torg, it's like that.
And most people probably
So
go, "What?"
they don't know what in the hell I'm talking about. No.
Which is a shame because it sounds really interesting. Like I have a sort of like back catalog of systems. I'm like, I need to try that at some point. And Torg has found its way onto that list. I'm fascinated by the idea of the cards. I'm sure there's a lot of hilarious potential for snowballing with the way the dice works, the way you just constantly add on if you roll certain numbers and you just keep
Yes.
rolling till you don't roll those numbers.
Yes, and in fact, there's a card called a glory card that if you roll high enough, if you get a score that's high enough, you can play this card called a glory card if you have it. And what it does is just infuses the entire area with this possibility energy, and you can just be these massive crazy things, like lift up a car and all this kind of crazy, cinematic weird stuff.
Yeah.
um because the possibilities have just been the restrictions on any kind of possibilities have been lifted in this area. So yeah, the exploding dice, like if you roll a 10 or a 20, it explodes.
Yeah.
You can roll again, and you can continue rolling, and you can add a possibility on top of it and roll more, and just keep going until it ends, until it stops.
Yeah, there's between the cards and and the exploded ice, there's so much potential for insanity. Now, I tend to when I play these games, I tend to go for more like not necessarily grounded, but I do prefer the more sort of serious storytelling because that's the sort of
Mhm.
stuff I do. But that doesn't mean I don't like it when the zaniness filters in. You got to get a mix, and this seems like it's going to be very much in the sweet spot where you have a very genuine narrative to whatever you're doing, but then also who knows what will happen inside that context of that narrative. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's actually another thing about the game that really is kind of reflective in the way that I write, is that I'm very tonally diverse. I write a lot of tonal wise. I write a lot of different things, um, and the game is like this too. I mean, as a GM, you can stay perfectly in keeping with the game without breaking it, going from horror to satire to silly to tragedy, and it doesn't break. It's all part of the same thing. And I write that way quite a bit. Like I'll do tonal shifts like all the time.
Yeah, I do because yeah, it's built in a way where with all these different realities filtering in, where diegetically even it makes sense to have these wild tonal shifts and to suddenly be dealing with different tropes or trope subversions all the time because in universe that is actually happening. So it's very much a good game to go into if you want to do something different every week.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It is. It's never the same. That's for sure. And as far as like being a little more serious or a little more I guess austere, there are definitely those cosms and those encounters that exist. And like one of the cosms is the cyber papacy. And I don't know if you had read about that
I
one, but
One of the
um
things in my notes is that we have to talk about the cyber papacy because that is the
yeah.
most insane concept I have heard in a while.
Yeah, yeah. That basically the internet is God. Yeah, yeah. It's this ultra surveillance state. It's a religious theocracy that is built on surveillance.
Yeah, it's cyberpunk Catholicism is what I read, basically
That's
sort of described it as.
that.
And
Yeah,
that's so what? Who thought about combining those two things?
It's yes, it's bananas. And when I'm talking about it being austere, it's and so part of like the benediction is you getting a cyber eye that allows you to see 700 yards, or allows you to be able to shoot a laser beam or something. That's part of the benediction. Oh, we're gonna receive your benediction now, and they augment your arm with some kind of long cable that wraps around somebody. I mean, so that's like the blessing.
Yeah, a little more hardcore than eating a cracker and taking a dip.
Yeah, just a little. But yeah, and it's and that part of the world is kind of Central Europe, like Spain, France,
Yeah.
into some of like Switzerland, Germany, that kind of area. So there's crossover with that, and Isle with the fantasy realm. So they have like conflict between like super high tech religious orders and magic.
Yeah, that happens. You can jump between them. One week you're in high fantasy, the next week you're in cyberpunk, and it makes sense. And then also those two
Yeah,
sides are now arguing, and you're in the middle. Like that is it's a very fun concept, and also completely insane.
yeah, it's bonkers. It really is bonkers. But again, it's like it's sincere. It's not they're not. It's not a parody of itself. They're taking this bonkers stuff that they're doing very seriously.
That's where some of the best storytelling comes from, is taking a
I agree.
completely batshit concept and just
Yeah,
doing it completely earnestly.
yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's some of the most interesting storytelling out there, is when people just turn things around, like turn things on its ear, and just go weird with it. So I like, and that's one of the reasons why I really like it. So that's one of the reasons why I was pulled to it, and it appeals to me. Like I said, it's a lot like the kind of stuff I write. And so I was, when I found it, and I was already kind of writing this way. And when I found it, I was like, well, hell, I could have written this, this is,
It just
I could have
clicks.
written some of this. Yeah, absolutely. It clicked. It clicked perfectly.
I definitely need to try this game. I definitely need to try this game specifically just to do something with the cyber papacy, because I it's so I mean it's just completely insane, but also it touches on a lot of the sort of themes like surveillance states and corrupt oligarchical or theocratic governments, and the cyberpunk's not huge for me really, but all of the themes that come with it are all those things,
Mhm.
religious, theocratic, corruption, all of that built into one thing. It sounds like a lot of fun to explore, and the idea of the internet as God, the idea of the most terrifying concept of their cyber hell or whatever it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
The idea that
Yeah.
you may just be permanently uploaded into a hellscape you could never escape is kind of
You can't
terrifying and
ever.
nightmarish.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and in the and then there's the I mean, the High Lord of that particular area is Jean Malraux. That's his name. And he is quite literally called the Cyber Pope. That's what he's called. He's the Cyber Pope.
If it wasn't such a terrifying sort of setting, it would be really funny.
Right. Right. Yeah. But I've played we've run through, when I was playing this, we've run through the cyber papacy, and I kind of thought the same thing. I was kind of goofy. And when we were when we're actually playing it, then you have like cyber angels, and you have like these cyber priests, and I guess religious witches, and all these things that are not goofy at all, and they're pretty menacing. Um, so that's why I brought it up when you were talking about something being a little bit more serious, because when I played, that was certainly the most like that was the scariest one that we played in, was the cyber papacy.
When the cyber pope says that God is always watching you, he's telling the truth. Like,
Yeah, right, right. The God net, the God net. They call it the God net.
They really did look at the Terminator movies and go, "Oh, we can do better than that."
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. But my favorite cosm that I like to play in was the Nile Empire, which is kind of a, you take like the 1920s, 30s, and you pull a an Egyptian skin over it. And so like the Egyptian mythology still exists with this in this pulp world. So
Almost
when I
it. I was like, it almost sounds like Egyptian noir to me, with a sprinkle, with a dash of spiritualism.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a way to describe it. But for me, it was when, because I'm very drawn to comic books. It's the way it's how I learned to read, was through comic books. And so this one was the one that was the pulp. It was pulpy, and it was superheroes and supervillains
Oh, it is.
and all that
Right,
kind of
right.
stuff. Yeah, so I was, matter of fact, my favorite character that I ever played was from the Nile Empire. He was this guy named the Scarab, and he was he had all these kind of like sorcerer type powers, that like, mind control, and he was like super agility and that kind of thing. And he was and it was a lot of fun to play. I remember one particular thing where he was fighting on top of a blimp with someone, and he knocked the person off the blimp, and a biplane came by and tried to like knock him over. He able to dodge it, and he pulled out a whip and grabbed onto the biplane, and the biplane pulled him. So he's climbing up the whip to try to get to the biplane, the pilot of the biplane. And it was just like, again, just like
I
you
feel
can
like I've seen
hear
this movie.
John Williams in the background and everything. Yeah,
It's very,
exactly.
very Indiana Jones.
Very much so. Yeah, Indiana Jones is very much that way. But that was my favorite cosm to play in and to mess around with, because it was really all over the place. I mean, it was serious and it was goofy and it was just wild. So I loved that. I love that about the setting.
And that is one of the interesting things about this is most of the games I've played in, obviously most of them have their own sort of canon settings. There's Eberron, in fact, the Forgotten Realms, all that stuff, or whatever. But I, by and large, prefer to build my own settings and stories. This system, I don't think I would do that. This might be the only, I might come up with my own stories, but I think this is the only system I've stumbled across where I'm like, no, I don't need to do anything with this setting. This setting is fine.
Yeah, I think that, and yeah, I think that's right. I think that's a good way to look at it, because there's so much there. I mean, what else do you need to add to it? I mean, it's talk about
Yeah.
convoluted.
Everything you could possibly want to run as a story ever is just already baked into the setting. There's no reason to
Yeah,
build anything else really. Break it, change the canon as much as you want, but like when you've got the Nile Empire and the Living Land and the Cyber Papacy all existing on the same planet at the same time, you
right.
what else could you possibly build that isn't already in here?
Right. And then you still have core Earth. I mean, you can still be a core Earther.
Yeah.
You can still be a core Earther. You can, there's Victorian monster hunters. And all these things exist alongside one another. So in your party, it's kind of like a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen on steroids. You got a Solomon Kane, and you got a Ryu from Street Fighter, and you got a I mean, they're all in the same party. So yeah,
It's
it's really all over the place.
I
and
don't know if you've
and
ever stumbled across that meme, which is like you could put a like frontier cowboy, a samurai, and a I think it was like a Mayan or something, or no, it could have been a Mayan. That wouldn't be right, but something else. There was a scholar from England, or I don't know what it was, all in the same party, and it would be historically accurate. It's like taking that concept and then just dialing up to like 50.
yeah, right. Yeah. Um yeah, yeah, that's kind of the premise of the way that this thing works. And that's one of the beauties of it, is that, the okay, I really think they kind of got together and said, okay, the gloves are off. We're going to do whatever we're going to do. I mean, it's all very controlled, because it's still rules based, and it's turn based, and it's, I mean, it's a tabletop RPG, so it's not just like do whatever you want. It's but they really kind of, I think, proverbially speaking, they pulled the gloves off and said, we're gonna let this thing go, kind of get a mind of its own and see what happens. Um, and the result was this game that's just kind of seems all over the place, but is actually pretty controlled, even in its absurdity.
Yeah, I actually have I played in a game that a friend of mine ran in a different system that was basically the concept of Torg. I think he would be kicking himself if he knew Torg existed now.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, like I said, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's great fun, but I wanted to talk about it just because I really feel like it's a lot like the kind of stuff that I write, and it was a big influence on me when I, like more of an encouragement, because I was already writing stuff like this. Tonal whiplash and just wildly crazy premises and characters that shouldn't go together that go together, and so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, was because it's a lot like the kind of stuff that I write.
That's one of the things that, I wanted to ask about is, how the different ways that this has impacted you as a writer and as a creative. And you've kind of covered it already. I was like, well, I can cross that off my list of questions. He's got oh, and everything else actually. You've got this covered. Because I was wondering how such a strange mismatch of things would have influenced you as a writer, as a creator. Because I mean, genre blending exists, but there's genre blending, and then there's whatever this is.
Right. Yeah. Well, the what I was saying at the beginning about the genre as metaphysics, is something that, um, I don't know if it's a conscious thing that I'm trying to do, but I'm telling the story within the genre. The genre is not the boundary. The boundary is the story.
I agree. I kind of I think I got sidetracked, but this that's kind of something I was trying to talk about earlier. Is this idea that we sometimes people they get so hard focused on I'm writing this genre, I've got to do X, Y, Z, and I think that's a very restrictive way to approach writing. Whereas if you go, this is the story I want to tell in the world I want to tell it, and then just write that story without worrying about standard genre conventions or even target audience, because that's something you can figure out later who to market the story to. I think it's freeing.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, I'm lucky in that I don't have to write for my livelihood. So I wouldn't. It's not a hobby. I mean, it definitely is a career. It's another career of mine, or another profession. But it's the one that I'm able to, have my artistic outlet and creative outlet through this. And that's important to me. And it's important to me. I've always wanted to be a published writer, and now I am. So I'm happy with that, and I continue to do that. But yeah, using genre, or saying I am a genre, I write this kind of genre. You're right. It is extremely restrictive, and it is also, and that's one of the reasons why you're reading someone like, say, I mean, I'm not going to name any names, but you're reading somebody that's written 30 different fantasy books, and 15 of them are almost exactly the same as each other. And they have all the same, progressions, and they have some of the same characters, even though they're named differently. And then the settings are really very similar. And so I think it's important to be able to not limit yourself as saying I am a genre X genre writer.
Yeah.
Danielle Steele doesn't count because she's a billionaire. So, you know what I mean? I mean, we don't have to talk about her, but
I mean, like it's not like saying you can't only write one genre. It's more a matter of if you set out to write the genre as standard, that's all you're ever going to do.
well, and you're writing a story that's already been written. Somebody out there has already written this story, in my opinion. So I don't even hardly ever even think about genre when I'm writing. It's just, um I'm writing the story that the way that I want to tell it. So like I mean, I wrote a story about kind of a almost like a custody battle sort of thing, um between or not between like these kids' parents and a sentient robot that becomes sentient. That
Okay,
he's like the
that is
caretaker.
amazing.
And he's the caretaker for this child, and the parents have been off planet for how many years working in some other planet, and they left this robot to be the kid's caretaker. And then as they're gone, the robot becomes sentient. And now he's like, no, I'm the parent, I'm the so it's
Sci-fi
so
legal drama with a sprinkling of like familial drama in there. I mean, that's one hell of of an idea. That's good.
I'll give you another example. There's a story that I wrote called The Ninth Life of Weatherford Finch. And I got this idea from she was 8 years old at the time, my 8-year-old niece. She'd never seen the movie Willow, and we're watching Willow. And there's a scene in the movie, and I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Willow, there's a scene where the evil sorceress named Bavmorda turns the entire like good guy army, turns them all into pigs. And it's a real climactic scene. It's like, oh, the good guys are going to get beat, and she turns them all into pigs. And she says to me, do you think that the sorcerers had to change their DNA to turn them all into pigs? And this kid was 8 years old. And I said, I think that's the only way she did it. I don't think there's any other way to do it. So that gave me an idea to write this story about a guy who wants to escape the confines of humanity, like illnesses, because he's really ill, and alimony, because he has to pay alimony to like 3 different ex-wives by turning himself into a cat.
Good choice of animal.
Yeah, right. And then come to find out that there are all these other like scientists and scholars that have turned themselves into cats uh, as well. So yeah. But like I said, I don't try to stay in with genre. You know what I mean?
No, those are some really creative, really fun concepts. I don't think I've done anything quite that crazy.
Yeah. No, I have definitely gotten the comment slash praise slash criticism that my stories are unique. So some people that is that they're too unique.
I mean, if something's too unique, that's a matter of taste, I think,
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. But whatever. People can say whatever they want about whatever they want. It's not. I don't. That doesn't. That's fine. They
Yeah,
can.
screw that.
They can
Those are
not
good
like something
ideas.
because yeah. It's fine with me. I don't care. I don't need the validation
That's
in
fair.
that way. So I'm good.
Sorry, I still haven't quite gotten over guy turns himself into cat to escape alimony.
Oh yeah. That's pretty much what the story is. That actually got picked up by by an anthology called Breaking Through the Penumbra, and by what's it? Cicada Song Press is the name of the place that put it out. But yeah, it was I was really happy to be a part of it. And there are a bunch of good writers in that too. So that was really cool. I just did another anthology that came out. And this is all this stuff is relatable to Torg as well. But I
Yeah,
just got
I can
another
tell. Like
anthology.
I can see the
Yeah.
link, don't worry.
Yeah. Another one that just came out called Surviving Humanity, and it's by a group called the Right Hive. And if you don't know who the Right Hive is, I definitely recommend you check them out. It's like a nonprofit group of like editors and agents and writers and stuff that get together and just kind of promote writing. And it's really cool. But they just did this anthology, and all the anthology's proceeds go to like kind of keeping the Right Hive going. And the anthology is called Surviving Humanity. And my story that I submitted to them is actually the bookend story. It's the last story in the anthology, which I was very very flattered that they did that. But it's an alien invasion story, and the aliens give a make a deal, try to make a deal with humanity. And at this point, this is like in the near future, like maybe 50, 60 years in the future. And at this point, like fresh water is almost all gone, and energy is pretty much, they don't really have much energy anymore, and the population of the planet has ballooned to like 16, 17 billion, and so it's all the and then these aliens come down and try to make a deal, and it's up to this one guy to either take the deal or not take the deal. um so it's like a global catastrophe, but kind of Faustian bargain at the same time.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure for one guy to make that decision.
Yeah, it was but I was very happy with it, and very happy that they picked it up. So actually, I was going to put it in one of my collections, one of my short story collections that I was going to publish, and when they said that they were going to publish it, I'm like, okay, well, I got to pull that one out of there. So but I was happy about it. So
Yeah, I mean,
it worked
fair.
out pretty well.
What's
Yeah. Yeah, it worked out pretty well.
what strikes me as crazy about that is you've just told me about what three very different stories, and 100% those are all things I could believe happening in Torg.
Right, right. And it, like I said, there's tonal whiplash all over the place, right? Um, yeah, so same kind of deal, same kind of deal. And there's tonal whiplash within the story itself, like this absurd idea of this guy turning himself into a cat, and then meeting up with other scientists that turn themselves into cats too, and they're escaping, like one of somebody murdered somebody, and another person was in so much debt that he's in so much gambling debt that, and another one was an alcoholic. Well, cats don't have alcoholism, so he was cured immediately. Um,
So good.
so it's yeah, it's very serious topics, but the approach is not as serious.
Yeah, what this reminds me of a bit actually is I don't know if you would have read any of them, but Roald Dahl actually has released a series of like anthologies of adult fiction that not a lot of people know he had, adult stories, but he would approach an adult audience and much more mature concepts with that same sort of zaniness and almost whimsy as stuff like The Witches. And it kind of reminds me a bit of that.
Yeah, I think that he was, because some of his work was pretty adult, even though it was kind of whimsical. Like, he was the one, he wrote Willy Wonka, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about uh, juicing children and having them fall into big
Yeah.
chocolate vats, and I mean, the dude was macabre. I mean, he was a
Yeah, a little
macabre
bit.
writer, and he wrote it in this really accessible kind of way, where it's like, I think Terry Gilliam is another person that does that really well as too. Like, a lot of the movies that he's made, they have this real element of whimsy that's resting on top of these very serious philosophical ideas. The battle for good and evil and Time Bandits, and the relevance of aging in The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. I mean, he's very serious topics with these very again, whimsical and absurd overlays on top of them, and those are the things that I really try to write about as well. Like, I think it's important, and it's the only way I know how to kind of relate to the real world, is by treating it kind of goofy.
I mean, fair enough. Like when you look at some of the things that happen in reality, it's one of those things where you sort of think about it. And if someone had told me some of the things, like without any knowledge, had told me 10 years ago about just some of the things that have happened in the last year alone globally, I would have said, that is insane. That's so ludicrous. That wouldn't even happen in fiction. And here we are. So I think that's a good way to look at it. Way to look at reality in as well as a good way to look at fiction is this idea of just embracing the insanity of it all, but doing so with a straight face.
That's a great way to put it. I think it's a great way to put it. Yeah. You know, we're all walking around with the entirety of human knowledge in our pocket. Nobody
Yeah.
really think you don't really think about it in those terms. Everything that has happened before this second is sitting in your pocket. All you have to do is look it up. Knowing something and not knowing something is the same thing. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So
Yeah.
like
No,
you
I
want
get it.
you want to know where you want to know where Tom Petty is from. Okay, well now you don't have to know. It's right there. So it's a and like I said, like you said, like 15, 20 years ago, there was no that was like come on, there's no way you're going to be walking around with something in your pocket that has everything on it, you know. Every 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 song you've heard and every song you will ever hear is right there.
Yeah, it's you go through just even for me growing up in the late 90s into the 2000s, this just hearing all the time, oh well, you're never gonna have a calculator in your pocket, you're never gonna have that book with all that books with you. As it turns out, I actually am. And I think about it, trying to explain if you try to explain a smartphone to someone in the 1800s, they would either burn you at a stake, think you were insane, or think you were God.
Yeah, I was going to say they'd cast you into the God net.
Yeah, and then you look at like a setting like Torg, and those conversations are probably happening in that setting. Someone's coming over from the medieval realm or the living lands into the cyber papacy and discovering like, what do you mean the sum of all knowledge ever is accessible on this little metal brick?
Right,
What is
right.
plastic?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then on the flip, if you take someone from the cyber papacy and put them in a realm like the living land, where magic isn't something that takes place, right? And technology is pretty much your sticks and stones and bows and arrows are about the highest tech thing there is, but calling out for a god to help you in the sense of a miracle that happens on the daily, like every day. Oh, Lord, please light this fire. Boom, the fire's lit. You know what I mean? And that's something that doesn't exist in a place like another setting like Pan Pacifica, which is kind of like the super high tech
Yeah.
realm that's in Japan and Eastern China. It's kind of like Blade Runner, is the way that I like to describe it to people.
It's what people in the 80s and 90s thought Japan was going to look like in 2026.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very good way to say it because that's exactly the way it's exactly the way it works. Yeah. The electric samurais and the video game characters come to life and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. You wouldn't expect like all of that sort of insanity from this setting to be something you could somewhat parallel to reality, and yet here we are, where when you think about it, the internet is pretty close to all powerful in our society.
Yeah, it's yeah, it really is. It's and especially that when you get on it whenever you want.
Yeah, I mean, I owe a lot to the internet. My life would very much suck without it. So, so I can see where that's coming from, where the idea behind it all came from. It's just there's a lot to like about the embracing the absurdity and then writing the story seriously in the face of it. And I think that is something that it sounds like Torg has embraced as its philosophy a lot, and that you've embraced as your writing philosophy a lot. And I think it gets results if you can acknowledge the things that are insane about your setting and then go, okay, now we work with it and work with it earnestly.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. My happy place is always going to be like superheroes. That's pretty much my happy place as far as writing goes. Um, so you can imagine how I feel about the explosion of superhero genre right now.
Oh yeah.
It's a little disconcerting because for me it was never about the powers and what everybody could do. It was always about the myth. And I think that's one of the things that that Torg does well. Also, is it really talks about the feel and the myth and things that are involved in what you think that these genres are supposed to be. I think that comes through with the different world laws that some of these different all the different cosms have. So, just for example, like one of the laws in the living land is a law of savagery, where like once you're in that world, you're in this cosm, everyone is a little bit more feral, everyone is a little bit more savage. So, and as a result, mechanically you do more damage when you do this one particular thing. Like when you make a particular attack, you do more damage. Everybody does, because that it is a world law.
And I really like that. I really, really do like that because
Yeah.
so many people, so many stories, even, I should say, don't want to acknowledge the reality of the world that it's set in. I always appreciate it when a writer goes, okay, I'm telling a genuine, like, this isn't satire, it's not a deconstruction, it's not criticism. I'm taking, say, a superhero setting or a high fantasy setting, and I'm going, okay, what would it actually be like to live in that setting for people? What does it mean to be a part of that world? And I think by contrasting all of those different worlds, you definitely set up to have a lot of opportunity to explore that.
Yeah, because if you're from the world that's Victorian era monster hunter world, and you go into some place like the cyber papacy, you're ignorant. You're completely ignorant of what's going on there. So you're at the mercy of someone who does know. Or if you don't have anybody with you that does, then you're at the mercy of the society in general. It's not like you can just you can't, and especially in a place like that, you can't hide.
Yeah.
There's no real place to hide.
It sounds really good. I definitely need to give this game a try. I'm very, very curious.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. Even just the level of fun in it is just very, very high. My wife and I played for a campaign for a very long time. So it was she played kind of this she was a core earther that had like various psionic powers, and she was also a sniper. So she
Good
was so
combination.
yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. So yeah, we had a lot of fun playing that game. It was one of the most fun role playing experiences I'd ever had. So
You could
and
you could do a
certainly the
lot.
game was
I'm,
oh
I'm
yeah.
just yeah, I'm just thinking as a core Earther, you could do a lot with, genre savviness
Hmm.
almost being a key factor in things. You know, it could it could lead you to understanding a lot of things that people from other cosms might not, but also could lead you maybe making a lot of wrong assumptions because you're familiar with the tropes.
Right. Right.
That's very cool.
Now some of these places, like some of these cosms, if they take over a certain area, say like the living land takes over the eastern coast of the United States, everything in there is now part of the living land. So like cars don't function anymore. The people get turned into like cavemen. So it's a they're like Neanderthals walking around with dinosaurs, and it's like I said, it's a very all encompassing kind of a thing. When these cosms take over, they take over everything. It can be pretty harrowing when you're going in there and playing.
Oh yeah.
'Cause, if you had a sister that lived in you know North Carolina, now your sister is like a part lizard person, and she doesn't remember you at all. But because you're a storm knight, you can deal with it.
Oh man. Yeah, I do need to try this. That being said, though, I've just looked at the time.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
So I think we can leave this one there for now. It has been a blast to hear about this. Any time I get to hear someone just talk so enthusiastic about something they really like, it's great. Even if it's something I don't have any interest in, that sort of is enjoyable to do. And I do have an interest in this, so
Yeah, yeah, I think you'd really dig it. It's a lot of fun.
And maybe other people who listen to this, maybe you should give it a try too, because it really does sound good. Until then, though, if you are listening to this on Spotify or YouTube or Apple Podcasts or anything like that, you can also find these episodes on my website, radfordwrites.com, where I also share various stories and poems and blogs and articles, and where you could buy my books, everything like that. And if you're listening to it over there, vice versa, you can also find it in all those other places. And where's best for people to sort of find you and your work?
I have two books that are out right now on KDP on Amazon. One of them is a collection called Mad Tapestry, which is kind of a themeless anthology in the realm of Black Mirror and the Twilight Zone. And then I have another anthology that is 7 short stories and 1 short novel, and it's all in superhero genre, and it's called Super Powerless, and basically it's superhero stories for people that love the genre and are sick of it.
Oh, that's really
Yeah,
good.
that's pretty much it. So
Oh, I really hope that's how you market it everywhere. That's fantastic.
it is, it is, yeah, it is.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on and talking about Torg and introducing me to Torg.
Oh yeah,
Hope,
you bet. Thanks for having
yeah.
me.
Until then, goodbye.
All right, take care.